welcome back to another YouTube video. This is a video that I'm super excited to be doing, and it's just such a big milestone, and also just so many lessons learned throughout the entire 10-year journey that I want to share with you. And so thank you for tuning in. If you're new here, please subscribe, make sure you stay up to date with kind of all of the random videos that I put out. And so I thought what was neat about doing this video is that truly the reason this channel was born years ago was because I wanted to showcase a little bit about my career journey since being in the field and encouraging more women and just diverse talent to come into the industry through kind of sharing my experience. And so it's really cool that I can now do a 10-year video of just what it's like to be working in SLB. And so this is my 10-year career SLB journey that I kind of want to share with you. If this is somewhat encouraging for you, or if you're just trying to look out for career stories in the industry, I kind of just want to do like my review of looking back on my journey. And so I wrote down on my iPad just kind of some dates so that I can remember. But just know that it's so cyclical. There's so many ups and there are so many downs. But I think at the end of the day, I'm obviously still here for a reason because I truly enjoy working here and I love the people. I would say part of the biggest reason of why people like to work at SLB is just the people that they recruit. We all kind of seem to have been cut from the same cloth in a way. Like we've got very similar work ethic. Even though we all come from different backgrounds around the world, we all kind of have that same kind of personality and drive. And yeah, there's something in our DNA that I would say is very similar to a lot of people that kind of get recruited from straight out of college. And so anyways, so I was hired in May of 2013. And so I started as a wireline field engineer for open hole, and my training was done in Abu Dhabi. So you usually are sent to a training facility when you start an SLB in the field. And for me, it was the MLC facility, which is the training center in Abu Dhabi. And back then, so by the way, there's a lot of things that have changed, but I'll kind of go through what my experience was like. So I was there for about a little under 3 months. Now I believe it's a lot shorter. And it was called Pep 1. And that's how I would describe that, is basically college all over again, but intense, tons of classes back to back of different of stress and school. And it's almost 7 days a week. Sometimes we get Sundays off, but it was literally every day classes. You're with the same like 20 people every single day. You all live in the same training center. And so but there was tests, like very hard tests, where you had to do all these multiple choices. And, if you failed several of them, like you would actually get fired because you're already working. So you're an employee, you would basically like fail the class and they would, send you home. And so it was a very stressful period in my life where I was like, oh, I don't want to get fired. Like I need to make it. I need to make it through this class. And I remember they would always tell us like, a lot of you aren't going to make it, like we're really going to see what you're made of. And so that training for almost 3 months was so intense, but you learned so much. You're like drinking out of a fire hose. And really, they kind of try to prepare you a little bit of what like your life is going to look like later. But I found training was very different from like when you arrive to your location and you're like, okay, this is textbook and then this is real life. And so very similar to when you go to school and you learn all these things in your textbook and then you go into the corporate world and you're like, yeah, that doesn't work like that. And so it was good though that you needed that kind of training to kind of understand a little bit what you were going to be signed up to do when you got to the field. And so you got to see the tools, you got to know how to maintenance them, how to, read the logs and all of this stuff, and kind of how to go inside a, wireline unit, what that was going to look like. And so it's really cool that they kind of hire you and they right away like train you into what they need you to become, because a lot of what you learn in school is not necessarily applicable. Like it's good that you know a lot of these engineering like equations and terms because it's going to help you troubleshoot. But I would say really what they're looking for is someone that can troubleshoot, that can solve problems, like going into the real world. And I was in the middle of nowhere, like in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East, when like really I was growing up in Canada, which was very far away from my family. But that was kind of the first introduction into Schlumberger which is now SLB. But again, it kept me excited to see what was next. I think another really neat thing about SLB, not, I don't know if it's still the same nowadays, but you were basically hired and told like you could be CEO one day. Like we hire from within through all of the levels. It's really rare that they go external to hire people. And so it's kind of like we promote from within. So you can start at the field level and become CEO. You can start, in a manufacturing facility and make it to president or CEO. And so it's nice to know that, the opportunities are endless if you really want to get there. And so I think that's kind of the culture that we've always had, which I really liked. And I do see nowadays we are hiring a lot of external for certain roles and things like that. So it's kind of nice to see that we've evolved into like, okay, maybe we don't have all the talent or we have the right talent internally. So we should go external and grab that talent to, help us continue to evolve. Whereas before I felt like it was very closed, like you have to start an SLB to like become again, first year, I was excited. Then I got to my location. So for me, it was Grand Prairie and Nisku in Canada, in Alberta. And so I first started, I shadowed an engineer. I went to location with them. I like learned what it was like to be a wireline engineer. And I worked a schedule of 2 weeks on, so work every single day. And then I had a week off. And for me, that was one of the main reasons I signed up for this job, because it was a lifestyle that I felt like I could do. I don't mind hustling for 2 weeks straight and like killing myself 100-hour plus weeks. But then I was like, I get to chill for an entire week. Like I can go on vacation. I can go see my family. I can do a hobby for an entire week where it's not just like a quick weekend. And that was a huge seller for me. So for some people, you may be listening to this going like, hell no, I wouldn't want to work for 2 weeks straight. For me, it worked out. I planned my life around it, where I would do a lot of fun trips around it. Sometimes I would work a month straight and take 2 weeks off. So it was nice that when you're in the field, you can kind of work out schedules and do trips. We literally had like a 1 week vacation every 2 weeks. And so that was a huge seller for me. Again, I don't know what the schedules are now. I don't know if that's changed. It also really depended on your location. It's very different. My experience has been North America. So I would say like, take it with a grain of salt in terms of like what your expectations could be. But again, first year, I was on a high. Every day was just an adventure. I was there to learn. I was making money for the first time in my life. And so for me, it was like it was awesome. My bank account was growing. I was having a good time. The other thing that I really liked was when I was in the field, everybody around me was like my age. Like all the other engineers, they were also 5 years or less since they graduated. And that was just cool. It almost felt like you had like a family at work that was all your age. And of course, management was a little bit older, but they were still pretty young. And for Canada specifically, winter projects came around and I broke out, so I went from a green hat to a white hat. And then I was out on my own. I was making bigger bonuses. Like, again, I was so happy to be there. And one of the best things about being a field engineer was you'll never be bored, in the sense that every day was just so different. You will never have the same day twice. And that was a big thing for me. I just kept thinking like, oh gosh, if I went to the office and it was just like in a 9 to 5 in my little cubicle every day, doing the same task, same Excel sheet or same whatever project I was on, that to me sounded like boredom. While as when you were a field engineer, it's like you had different jobs, different customers, different tools that you would run. And every day was literally, like I call it, like a shit show, because it's just like so much stuff is thrown at you. You're young, you're inexperienced in a way. You're dealing with like $1 million worth of jobs and tools out in the field. You're the most responsible person there, in the sense that everybody's looking to you as like the expert. And so I would say a lot of that excitement and just stress filled me. While as for other people, it was probably like, I absolutely hate this job. And so I did notice quickly a lot of people dropped off from even the people that I went to school with. They were just like, this is not for me. Like, I want to go to a normal job. I want a normal life. And that's fine. But for the people who I feel like are a little crazy like me, like we thrived off of the unknown, off of the excitement, off of the adventure. So I would always tell people, even when I go recruiting and things, like you really have to like figure that out. Like, is this the kind of life that you want? It's short in the sense that like it's not going to be for the rest of your life, but are you willing to sacrifice a few years of madness? But the reward is there. And so that's something you kind of have to look in. But for me, I was there for the reward. I was there for the excitement, for the money, and for the adventure of the field. And knowing that, in a few years, I'm going to go into an office. So let me just enjoy this time. So as I was saying, things were just getting a little bit harder where I was comparing my life to those who are in a 9 to 5. And after 2 years, I just felt like it does start to drain you a little bit of having that intense, stressful life. Like I was always stressed. And but my husband kept pushing me up, like, you got this. This is fine. Like this is a short period of time. Get your grade 11. So that's another kind of quick thing. So when you enter the field, you're in grade 8, I believe. And by the time you get your promotions throughout the years, they usually say about 3 to 5 years, you get your grade 11. When you get your grade 11, it means like you can kind of get out of the field and go into different types of roles afterwards. So my entire field career, I just wanted to get to that grade 11 to prove myself, to kind of graduate from the field, make it to general field engineers, like this big title. And it takes between 3 to 5 years. Some people would take 7 years. I would say back in the day, people were in the field longer. Now I would say it's a lot shorter. I'm looking here at my timeline. And so about 2014 to 15, I got moved over to Thrubit, which was a company that they kind of had bought in the US from Oklahoma, I believe. And they were bringing that technology over to Canada. And I was kind of selected as two of the engineers to kind of start off this business in Canada. And so I had to be cross-trained into like the different tools and the different ways that they ran the operations. It was a little bit different from wireline, even though it was still considered like a wireline service. And so I got to learn a lot. And that was kind of when I was at a peak. I was high for 2 years. And I was kind of getting a little bit burnt down and like a little bit unhappy of the cycle and the stress. And then you're kind of in the low for a little bit. And then I got moved over to this new kind of small company called Thrubit within the company. And again, my learning curve came up. I felt like I was being valued and kind of like, kind of was getting out of it and like excited again. The bonuses were even bigger with Thrubit. So I was making more money. And so kind of went down. And then here I was back up on the hill of excitement. And then I would say about a year and a half in, here we're looking at 2015. Huge downturn, my first downturn. And so I didn't know what that meant, right? I'm new to the industry. I've never heard of people getting laid off. I've never heard of a cyclical business. Like I'm new to the industry. And so all of my operators who had been through it for the last 20 years are like, oh, when the downturn comes, like everyone's chopped, like you're all on the chopping block, etc. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose my job. And so 2015 hit, huge kind of recession in Canada at that time. And the barrel's going down and they start cutting jobs left and right. And so every day I would come to the office and people would have packages. I'm like, what's a package? And it was just basically like, here's your severance, you get paid a little bit, or depending on how many years you've been here, and you're basically laid off. And you give in your laptop, your keys, like whatever, and you're out of the office within the same day. And that was, I would say, like traumatizing for me because I was like, what? Like half of these people are gone. I'll probably be gone very soon. And so I learned through that downturn that it is very difficult. It's difficult for even the managers. I would say it's even harder for them to have to be laying off so many people. Some people were getting LOAs, which I didn't know what it was, but it's basically like you sign something that you kind of take a year off while the cycle gets a little bit better. And if so, they'll rehire you back. You keep some benefits. Don't really know exactly. I never got one. But yeah, it was a very difficult time. So again, my morale kind of went down from my high, and I kind of was expected to be laid off, but I didn't think so because there wasn't that many people that knew how to run Thrubit. And so basically I worked an entire year, almost like from 2015 to 16, with very little resources and very little amount of people at the shop. So it was hard because all of my friends, all of my colleagues, and the majority of them were laid off. And so we had just this tiny crew of people kind of just trying to run this entire place with very little hands. And so morale was terrible for that entire year. And then Canada, unfortunately, like things did not get better. They were hoping that after a year things would get better, and they didn't. And then all of a sudden, 2016, certain people that had gotten LOAs were starting to come back after a year of not working, etc. And they basically had to do like another layer of layoffs. And one day, like I arrived at the shop, it's 2016, and my entire crew, my operators, kind of like everybody was left. We just got a package because they were bringing like the people who were gone for a year, and then like I guess they're like, we have got too much headcount. We got to get rid of the people who've been helping us for an entire year. And so in 2016, I got laid off, and I remember, and I think I've done a video on this, which I'll try to link here, where it's called my layoff story. But I was traumatized. It was just like a punch in the gut of I got laid off. What am I going to do now? I thought I was going to be here for 30 years, like, the typical, like, I thought I was going to be here forever. And just like one day you have a job, the next day you don't. And so that was, and, like looking back, and I always say it, it was probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. In the moment, it wasn't. You think it's the end of the world. Like I was bawling, I was crying, I was hysterical of like, I gave up my entire 20s to be here for the last 4 years. Like, what am I going to do now? Right. And, but it built so much character in me. And it also just, I don't know how to explain it. It was just the best thing that's ever happened, because then I no longer ever tied my identity to a company, ever. Even now, as happy as I am, I can move on tomorrow. And I think that power is truly, it gives you freedom. And I don't think I would have ever had it. I would have been just stuck in that if I would have never got laid off. So the fact that I got laid off and I lived outside of the company, and I was like, oh, okay, the world continues to turn around, like my life goes on and I'm okay, was a huge lesson for me. And so, and I'm glad it happened so early on in my career. I was so young to know that, like, you're replaceable. Second, save your money for the downturns. And third, like, this is going to happen. We live in, the oil and gas industry, and it's so cyclical. So you just got to be prepared. And that's why you got to network. That's why you got to have your resume ready. That's why you got to know people externally, because like this stuff happens every few years. And so huge lesson learned for me. So again, huge down from the up, right? Of being in through bid and all that. Huge down. I basically went to work at Budweiser. They had a big brewery in Edmonton in Canada where I was, and they were looking for chemical engineers. And I'm like, oh, gosh, I love the oil and gas industry. It's like where the money's at. It's a great lifestyle. I loved, like I said, my 2 weeks on, 1 week off. And when I got hired to go work at the plant, it was your typical like 12-hour shifts, or 8-hour shifts, Monday to Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., or depending on like the schedule that we had. And I was miserable. I missed the oil field daily. And what sucked though at the time is that nobody was hiring. So it's not like it's not like when you get fired, but like oil is like $100+ a barrel, you can go get a job, across the street. I didn't have that luxury because everyone was getting laid off in every single company. Like Canada was just doing terrible. So I didn't have that opportunity to continue a career in oil and gas because nobody was hiring. And so I just kind of went to work at the plant. And it's important to keep your network, even if you get laid off. And I've noticed that now so many people that got laid off just come back a few years later. Like, hey, you want to come back to work? And most people, I would say, if they were laid off in a nice way, and they still have like that love for the company, depending on how they get laid off. Because if you get laid off with a bad manager who just like get out, I don't think you would want to come back. But if you still have that friendship with a lot of people, it's a lot easier to come back. So I did get a phone call about 6 months in, and I decided to come back to work in the field because I really did miss it. I missed the lifestyle. I missed the days off. I missed the money because it's very different working in a plant versus in the field. And so I decided to come back. So I was on a high when I came back. And interestingly enough, when I came back in 2017, they said, you have to move to Midland because Canada is still not doing really well. So you have to go down to Midland, Texas, and continue your career there. And basically at that point, I was like, okay, I have about a year left before I can get my grade 11. Because I went down to Midland, my husband stayed in Canada. So that was, again, a little bit hard again, where I was very remote. I lived in Midland. I was renting a room, but I also lived in Canada because we had bought a home. We had 2 dogs. And so we were kind of starting our life in Canada, and then all of a sudden I get sent to Midland. But again, super supportive. He's like, let's just make it work. Go work in Midland. And I did. And I was there for about a year and a little bit. And the morale was good when I first got there because everything's new. It's exciting. But then by the end of that year, I was burnt out, where Midland's hard to work in the sense that it's just job after job after job, big jobs, huge preparations, very high technology, high visibility type of, geo unit, etc. And so it was good, but I was burnt out. My schedule was also really hard, and I was the one that made it hard because I had to fly back and forth to Canada. So I made a deal with the boss of like, let me work 30 days straight and I'll go home for like 8. And so after a year of doing 30 days in a row in Midland, I was completely burnt out. The morale was pretty low in Midland, just for a lot of different reasons, management, etc. A lot of people were getting just leaving, like they were just quitting their jobs as field engineers and going to different companies. And so when you kind of have that morale of other people just unhappy, it kind of rubs off on everybody when everybody's like depressed, and so are you. And so it was kind of hard to keep up. And I think also too, after 5 years, for me, I was getting tired of the field. And so it was kind of like, this is my way out. Like I need to get out. And so again, I was kind of on a low, and got my grade 11. And right at the point where I was really, really on the low, I was actually gonna leave SLB because I had gotten a job at Kiewit, which is a huge construction company. So I'm about to leave the company 5 years in, and I got scooped up. Got a phone call from I'm not gonna name him, but love that guy, one of the best managers I've ever had. And he was like, hey, we're starting this new company under SLB. It's called Extreme. Actually, at the time, it wasn't called Extreme, but it turned into Extreme. And he said, we're going to be doing this, this, this. We think you're the right profile. Like, we need a salesperson, someone that's a hustler that can open doors. It's going to be in the US and Canada. You know this market. And I was kind of like intrigued by the excitement of a new company that we were going to be running like a startup. Huge opportunity that I don't think everybody gets. And so I decided to not take the offer, like backed out of the offer, and decided to take this offer internally. And so I got my grade 11. He moved me back to Canada because he knew my husband was there, and we were kind of doing the back and forth after a year, and he knew like my morale was a little low. And so he moved me back to Canada and said, settle in, help me build this business. You're going to have to fly to the US. And we were also starting it in Calgary and like a few places in Canada. So he was okay with me going back and forth between both countries. And he basically was like, in 6 months, if we build this business up and we can actually prove the concept, then maybe it'd be nice if you moved to Sugarland. And then I was kind of back up on that high. I had a good manager. I would say he was probably the first good manager I've ever had in this company. And he just took me under his wing. He mentored me a lot. He was just like a fun guy to be around. He was a big cheerleader for anything that you wanted to do. And that was the kind of manager that I needed. Someone that was just like, yeah, let's try this out. You got this. Like, your idea is crazy, but let's try it. And we were super successful in that business because he was so open to trying new things. He was not like putting me in a box. And then about 6 months later, exactly like he said, he moved us down to Houston. And my husband moved with me. He was happy with it. We moved both of our dogs. And we were just so happy to be in Houston. Like, we were living. And so again, my morale kind of like went up the hill, and I was excited to be here. And so 2019, all of that, I was here in Houston. We were building up the business with Extreme. My manager at the time moved. I got a new manager, which I loved as well. Awesome guy. And then we continued to build the business, super successful. And I was having a good time. I was in sales. I was making good money. I was building relationships. This was like the right role for me. And then 2020 came around. So COVID hit. And again, layoffs started again. So it was a little bit of an uncertainty time. I was already used to that layoff cycle because it was going to be my second time around. And this time I was way more confident than the first time because I'm like, I've been through this rodeo. Like, I know how this works. It's fine. Like, I got this. My life's going to move on if I get laid off, etc. And I think we were in such a small niche of the business that was actually doing really well that, we didn't get slashed. Some of the team members did, but they were a lot newer. They were not like legacy SLB. They were people that we had hired from, the industry to try to grow this business. And so right at COVID, they laid everybody off. And then we were about like 4 people on the team. And so that was a hard time because, of course, the entire industry is going through hell. Uncertainties through the roof because, oil was trading at like -20. And who am I going to sell to if everybody's like pulling out of businesses, et cetera? And so it was a little scary, but I was prepared. And so COVID lasted. The four of us kind of continued to run the business. I was the only salesperson, so I was kind of continuing to make deals. And COVID was like the silver lining. Like I actually really enjoyed that year. It was a growth year for us. And yeah, and then at the end of COVID, I got pregnant. And so at that time, I had been in Extreme for about almost 4 years. And so I went on maternity leave, and I had already spoken with HR and said, like, I think I need to do an international role. Like, it's time, right? And also, I think after 4 years of Extreme, even though I was on a high, I was so excited. There was a point where like I was starting to peak and kind of become low again because I was like, I'm kind of bored. Like I'm selling the same thing. I know the customers, like with my eyes closed. This business is no longer exciting to me. I felt like I built it up to what it became. And then I was just looking for that next challenge, and had my baby, took my maternity leave for about 3 months. And then I came back to Extreme. And I would say 2 quarters later, like 6 months later, they decided to move me to Mexico. We were excited to go to Mexico. We sold our house, moved everything. I've done tons of videos on this. And I arrived to Mexico to realize that it wasn't the right role for me. And I was miserable. And so from the high, it dropped very low. And I would say this is the first time in my entire career, in the almost 10 years that I was there, where I was like in a deep hole. Like it was like the roller coaster crashed and I was very unhappy. And I think this happens to everybody. There's some point in your career where you're just unhappy with the team, with the role that you have, with whatever the circumstances is. And I think why I'm grateful is I've always had just the best support system at home. My husband's my number one cheerleader, and he's always the one that gets me out of all the holes. And so he was just like, it's fine. Like, we got this. This is, not going to be very long. And so that was, I would say, like the biggest challenge of my entire career was that Mexico assignment. And it was based on the fact that the role was not the right fit for me. And so when you're not doing something you love, you're not doing something where you feel like you're valued and where you're bringing, your best self to work, it's going to be very difficult. And that's how I felt. And so it was about 6 months of that. And then they moved me to another role. And again, from like a deep hole, it started to climb up. Great leaders. And I just loved the job that I was doing, that they offered me, because I felt like I could bring value. I could bring my knowledge to the table. And I felt like I was making an impact on the business and just kind of like uniting people together with that project. And so 2023, October, is when I received my letter that they were moving me back to Houston to a new role, which is the internal communications role for production systems, which is currently what I'm doing now. And it's the perfect job because, of course, like I've got YouTube, I've got a podcast, like I'm very creative. I love social media. I love connecting people. Communication is definitely a skill set that I have. And so it was like the perfect fit for me. And what I thought was interesting and why I've loved SLB for so long in terms of career path is that even if you're an engineer, you can end up in HR. You can end up in supply chain. You can end up in design. You can end up in, marketing and communications and just recruiting. That's the exciting part of SLB, is that the opportunities are endless in terms of what you can do in this company. And that's why a lot of people love being here and enjoy staying. It's because it's hard in other companies to, first of all, like move into different branches. While as here, it's very normal. Like you could be doing HR 1 year, then you could be back in operations, then you can be in recruiting for a year, then you can be in supply chain. And it's just like in sales, like it's very cool that you can go in from different functions so easily. While as in other companies, it's like you're in sales for the rest of your life, or you're in marketing for the rest of your life. And so that's something that's been exciting, is that every career opportunity that I've had has just been very, very different. And so you can build a lot of that skill set that you couldn't in other places. And so now I'm in communications. Never in a million years did I think that was even like a career path that I could take. I didn't even know these kind of jobs existed, to be honest. And so it's exciting that 10 years in, I am just challenged in a completely different way, but also doing things that I love, which I think needs to blend like your passion with what you're good at, and your job, you know, it needs to align in order for you to like feel happy and that you can like bring your authentic self to work and do things that you love and feel like you can make an impact on the organization. And so that's kind of where I'm at now. 10 years in May of last year. And so I'm going into my 11th year, but kind of just want to give a quick 10-year review of just how cyclical it could be. There's a lot of ups, there's a lot of downs, but I think anybody watching this can relate to their own careers because I think we all have very similar journeys in that it's not always going to be rainbows and butterflies, but it's not always going to be doom and gloom. You have a little bit of that balance. What keeps me going is just the excitement of the unknown and of the endless opportunities that are ahead. I would say a lot of the people that I see are very successful in this company are just people who are constantly wanting to get better and better and want challenges and are kind of like type A personalities of like, they want to do better, they want progress, they don't want to stay still in one place, they want to get out of their comfort zone. And that's the opportunities you get here because there's a lot of things thrown at you. And I think if you are good at being able to do well in that kind of environment, high stress, high performance type of job, then this is like a really good company for you because the challenges are definitely there. And I wanted to share because I know a lot of you watch random YouTube videos about myself, but I don't think a lot of people know the exact journey and all of the ups and downs. And so, yeah, I wanted to share that with you. And I encourage you to try a career in SLB. If you're looking at this video because you're new, you're fresh out, you're kind of looking to interview in different companies. I'm almost 11 years in and I don't think I would be anywhere. I'm here because I want to be. I have other opportunities all the time to go work in different companies in the industry, but I just have like this love for this company and they've been good to me. They've been good at giving me a great career. I do also think I've been really good at showing performance and value and bringing revenue when is needed. And so there's a little bit of that like balance of like, you need to give, but they also need to give in order to keep that kind of talent around. And so I would say, give it a try. It's not for everybody. Field engineering is not for everybody, especially in wireline. But if you're willing to kind of take that adventure and see where it takes you, and who knows, you can become the next CEO, that opportunity is definitely there for you. And so if you haven't yet, subscribe and like. And the next video that I'm going to do is one on recruiting. I think I'm going to do one on, you know, how to prepare for an interview, how to prepare for an SLB one, kind of what I think people are looking for when it comes to becoming a field engineer, since I've done a lot of recruiting sessions and things like that. And so thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this video, and it was a pleasure to spend the last 15 minutes with you. See you later.